The good news is, in a world like Mad Max, you can just take all the little bits and pieces that are laying around and just cobble them together into a functioning vehicle.
Yeah, like I found a tire. I'm going to attach it to the wheel of my Red Ryder wagon and put a V8 engine, strap it with leather onto the hood, and that's Mad Max.
That's all you need. It's incredible.
I think it'll fit.
Furiosa builds a mechanical arm in a couple hours with a box of scraps. Yeah. Tony Stark built this in a garage with a box of scraps.
Carlin, welcome back to Cinema Snorkel.
Thanks, Case. Good to be here.
It's been a minute, but it's great to be here. Wouldn't you say? What a lovely day.
Who do you think is having the best time in the Mad Max world? It's got to be the War Boys. It's got to be the War Boys because even though they're dying for nothing, they are enthusiastic.
They're dying enthusiastically
thrilled
for nothing. The War Boys.
They're having the best time.
Terrain Eternal, shiny and chrome.
My mother was magnificent, and he took it all from me.
Who do we have here?
My childhood. My mother.
I want them back. However long it takes. Promise you'll find your way home.
Ready, steady, go!
If you find him, he's mine.
To get home, Furiosa fought the world.
Remember me.
Carlin, today we're going to talk about, initially we had said the Furiosa spin-off of Mad Max. That was released earlier this year. Mad Max Furiosa. However, and we can explain this, we've decided to pivot and do a compare and contrast between Mad Max Fury Road, released in 2015, and this year's Furiosa. Do you want to explain, just from your vantage point, why we're doing that?
Yes, because one is 100% of a movie, and the other one is like 20% of a movie. I think if you liked Furiosa, that's great. I'm so glad you did. It falls into the classic trap of prequels and sequels, which is whatever went right in the first one is not what ended up in the sequel. It's almost like the filmmakers didn't understand what they'd done right, so they just replicated what they thought they'd done right, but they missed like the nugget of gold at its core. And Mad Max Fury Road is a golden nugget of a movie wrapped in bacon. It's like wrapped in amazing, cool special effects and world building and textures and awesome cars and whatnot. But that is not what we actually love about it, even though you might not realize that's not what you love about it.
Right.
So...
Yep. And we'll unpack that, but long story short, Furiosa was not the film that I anticipated, and that's probably because Mad Max Fury Road spoiled us on what a Mad Max action flick could be. Actually, like you're saying, the nugget of gold is the character development at the heart of it that draws you in and keeps you there, and actually leaves you walking away from the theaters going, that was really good, not... what did I just watch?
Yeah.
I would say, Carlin, for me, about half of the reason I didn't like Furiosa was ethics and morals. And we talk about this on the podcast a lot. We've only covered, I would say this would be the second one that we're going to cover, but I wouldn't necessarily endorse watching just on the pure, like, it really pushes the envelope of like what should be acceptable, I think, at least what I'm comfortable with watching. Here's my general philosophy of horror movies. Horror at its worst falls into just evoking a visceral response for the sake of shocking you.
Real quick, I don't know if we can categorize this movie as a horror film.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I don't know if I would categorize it as a horror film, but it dips into those elements of just viscera. It takes from the genre of horror. Again, like this would be an action flick with lots of grody elements. But the elicitation of horror is to the emotion of fear what pornography is to lust in its worst moments. Now, can you do a scary movie or even in some ways, a shocking movie and still have it be considered art versus just like that, kind of elicitation? Now, again, this is my opinion. A lot of people are going to disagree with this, but for me, I was like, this dips way into the just like shock genre, like gross you out, push the boundaries of what's acceptable and for what? So I was going to say half of the reason I didn't like Furiosa was moral, ethical. The other half was just aesthetic. Like you were saying, there was no good storytelling nugget at the heart of this like I was expecting. And that's partially on us. Like, let's go watch a rated R action flick. I wouldn't expect this from like Alien versus Predator, right? I'd expect the visceral reaction without much substance. But I think, like we said, Mad Max 2015 was such a good film that it had me thinking, oh, Furiosa is going to be exactly the same. And actually what we came away with was a way worse film on both fronts.
Yeah. So basically, Furiosa is the backstory that we didn't really need about this really cool character, Furiosa.
Totally. It had potential.
It shows like what's her childhood like. How does she become the hardened, awesome rig driver that she ends up being? But to me, having rewatched Mad Max Fury Road, the lock in Furiosa's character that we're looking for the key to is redemption. She says, I'm looking for redemption.
Yeah.
You would think a prequel about this character would show us what she needs redemption from.
Yeah.
But that doesn't feel like really what we got from Furiosa.
No.
What we got was her revenge story on
Dementis.
Red Dementis.
Yeah.
Am I missing something?
No, they cross their wires because in the second one, right, she makes, actually it starts off with, we don't know anything about her other than she's made this amazing decision to defect.
And to rescue the wives.
And that's all we know about her, which is a redemptive act. So, but what then they tried to do in Furiosa was paint that her backstory as noble and heroic to start with. But they try to tell us it's noble and heroic, but the whole film is her just seeking bloodthirsty revenge on someone. And then eventually, and we're just spoiling it right here, but like the very last scene, we got about a 10-minute monologue from Chris Hemsworth's Dementis about how revenge actually won't satisfy you, it won't bring anyone back, it won't change anything. And the best Furiosa says to that is like, I'm nothing like you. And then essentially what she does is do exactly what he did. Like she just like blinks at what he said and then takes revenge anyway in the most excruciating way possible. But by the end of that monologue, and to be honest, by the end of this really long movie, I was like exhausted from the revenge feeling that they had tried to cultivate. And even though they tried to one up their actual revenge with its savagery, right? Like she plants whatever peach pit like in his body to help it grow, but keeps him alive somehow. I just was so over it. I was like, oh, okay, so she's going to take like the worst revenge she can, but they try to show it as like a redemptive thing. I just was like, no.
Now, okay, let me push back a smidgy.
Yeah, please.
Right now, the world loves a villain story about how the villain descends into villainy. Maybe we're missing, the little intermission between Mad Max Furiosa and Mad Max Fury Road, which is that Furiosa realizes the thing she needs redemption for is the vengeance that she just extracted.
I mean, I hear what you're saying because I wondered that too. But even her monologue as she walks away, she's like, this fruit is not for us, but hopefully it will blossom into a good deed one day done for whatever.
Right.
The peach that grows on that tree. This is just like...
Yeah. And they end Furiosa with her climbing into the rig with the wives. So it's almost like no time has passed. We're jumping
There's
straight
no
into
time
the
that's
next
passed.
movie.
It's so silly.
Yeah.
What they did is took a turd and then tried to cover it with chocolate because the turd is revenge.
Yeah.
But they were like, but maybe it could lead to something good. But they're not saying I need to turn away from the revenge lifestyle and get into the hope business. They're saying revenge is just as fine. It ended up being just as fine because it can produce the hope you're actually looking for.
Yeah.
They literally said that. I mean, I don't know about literally, but they almost literally said that.
It's a dud. It just thumps. Like it just doesn't ring at all.
So
it doesn't ring.
Let's sketch out the plot here of Furiosa. I know we're way ahead. We're like knee deep in what we didn't like about it. But the plot of Furiosa mirrors Mad Max a little bit. She escapes from the mothers, right? There's this idyllic like humanity still left, and they live in kind of a lush jungle. But bikers take her captive, and essentially her mother comes to rescue her, but dies in the attempt. Dementis actually tortures her mom, setting up the whole revenge arc. So then we have Furiosa's whole life. She transfers from warlord to warlord and eventually works her way up by being awesome. And she is awesome. She's a very cool character, which is partially why I'm upset. Like, they had the makings of a great film, at least character arc wise, and at least ethically. Again, ethics is a weird thing to bring into it, but all of our lives revolve around those questions of right and wrong. The moral arc of the story matters. That's what stories are, essentially.
Absolutely.
So it's an aesthetic judgment as well as an ethical judgment to talk about this. Anyway, she's an awesome character, and long story short, she gets her revenge.
She's trying to get back to, because it's not first about revenge. First, she's trying to get back to the green place.
That's right.
And she's going to ride off into the sunset with her hunk of a guy who is like miraculously so kind and pure and like protects her. And they're like have selfless love for each other. And then he sacrifices himself for her, right? And then it's like, oh, she'll have to go on without him. And then in Mad Max, there's a moment where they're like, have you done this before? And she's like, many times. But now that I drive this rig, it's my best shot I'm ever going to get. So it's as if her whole motivation from the beginning has been, I'm trying to get back to the green place. That's the thing she promised her mother. Her mother said, just give me this one thing, no matter how long it takes, find your way back.
Ah, yes, that's right.
They kind of throw that out the window for the revenge plotline.
Yeah. That's a good point. It's a story that builds us on the premise of hope. And even is self-aware enough to acknowledge that, hey, like Dementis says it, he's like, this doesn't feel like a hope motivation. Only one thing's strong enough to bring you out into the desert after me, and that's hate. He literally says it. They're so self-aware.
Yeah.
And then what they do is cash in on the revenge anyway.
Okay,
but try to paint it as somehow tied to hope.
Can I go back to my pushback?
Please. I want to hear it.
I feel like there is something here. Where we are watching Furiosa lose herself. And at the end of the movie, she has lost herself. But it's like, because we're so interested in seeing her get her revenge, or at least the filmmakers think we're so interested in her getting her revenge.
I would say we are.
That we lose that nugget. But it could have been. What could have been if they had retained that element and made this into a tragedy where Furiosa forgot the thing that made her human and exchanged it, and then in turn became exactly like, what's his name? Dementis, then that to me sounds like maybe a different cut of this movie could have said that.
Oh, they so could have.
But then it got cut weird.
Because we feel the grossness of the revenge. By the end of, however, like 2.5 hour runtime, we feel the grossness of revenge.
Yep.
Even Dementis' final, he's on his knees and she's got a gun to his head. His monologue is telling us what we already know, that we're ready to see some resolution to this. Will it be revenge or hope? But Carlin, here's... I hate to even say this, but I think what muddies the water a little bit was trying to make Furiosa a girl boss.
Right.
They needed to tap into that girl boss energy. And to be a girl boss on a modern telling, you can't have done anything wrong the whole time. Because if you apologize for it, then you're letting the patriarchy win.
Yeah. Oh.
And so that's what corrupted what could have been an authentic tale. Here's the thing, there is an authentic way to do that, right? I think one of the poignant themes of Mad Max is the way that they show femininity as actually retaining some of that essential humanity that a world ruled by crazy biker gang men has totally lost. Like even the wives, what we see is actually there's humanity there. They're not just weird harem girls. They're put in tough circumstances, but we see their humanity shine through.
Absolutely.
Just like the many mothers in the green place, actually they're holding on to some of their humanity. And so there's a way to do it right. Like the 2015 Mad Max tells that story well. This one sacrifices morality for the sake of trying to show a girl boss beating all the dudes. And we're meant to root for it, but actually she totally sells her soul. To be a powerful woman on that reading, you can't change. Your initial motivation has to stay. You have to stay true to that the whole time. And so somehow they needed to just do both. It's like the prongs of a fork, and they needed to bend them together and show how the revenge actually was her way of getting back home and planting a peach tree. It just didn't make a lot of sense. It was frustrating.
As a side note, do you know why Jane Austen was so revolutionary as an author?
Why is that?
She wrote her female characters with flaws.
Yeah.
Her best, she wrote Lizzie Bennet, she wrote Emma, she wrote in Sense and Sensibility, she writes so many women that are struggling with moral issues, but they have to overcome their own like sin nature, and they have to overcome their own corruption
totally.
in order to do what's right. And they're like real people.
Yes.
It's a much more honoring portrayal of women to give them flaws, give them mistakes, and then to truly seek redemption. Redemption, I'm going to say this now, and then maybe we can circle back to it at the end. Redemption might be the single greatest story arc of all time.
I love that.
There's nothing better.
Redemption beats revenge.
Yeah, redemption beats revenge, yes.
Now, Carlin, we can hate on Furiosa, but one of the things we wanted to do is contrast with Mad Max Fury Road and show where that movie did so much right despite the gritty elements.
Yeah. Let's do it.
So on Mad Max Fury Road, what are the filmmakers trying to make us ask? What are the questions they're posing to the audience?
I've got a handful of themes rattling around in my brain, but I haven't been able to synthesize them. So maybe I can spit them out and then we can go through and
Love it. Love it.
One is self-sacrifice. And I want to contrast that to comma crazy.
Who's comma crazy? Which
Comma crazy. The War Boys. They're comma crazy. Okay, one is people are not things.
they say that, don't they? The wives.
Which I think if I were to hazard a guess, I would say this is like the anchor point in a world that's just absolute chaos and it's just devolved into the most ugly side of humanity. They stick their flag in the ground of people are not things.
Oof. Yeah, that's right.
So there's that one.
Yeah.
Then I want to talk about themes of redemption, of home, of mercy, loyalty. Where does loyalty come from? And then self-sacrifice.
Yeah. Yeah. All of those are woven. Those are all virtues that are woven together, I would say, in the common theme. This is what I would maybe point it as, of retaining your humanity. And those things are an essential component of humanity, the self-sacrifice, the loyalty to something other than yourself, right? The people are not things. People are an end in and of themselves, and it's worth it to help them if you can, even if it costs you everything.
Yeah.
Those are all a part of what we instinctively recognize as this is what it is to be human.
Yes.
And Mad Max paints the bleakest and most insane picture of what humanity could become in some bizarre Australian post-apocalyptic. It's all set in Australia, by the way.
Yeah.
What does it mean to retain your humanity / redeem your humanity?
Right. And even can you retain your humanity and die? Because there's a lot of death and there's a lot of throwing yourself into death. So, okay, let me just ask you this. What do you think is the difference between, maybe it's an obvious answer, but it's still worth asking. What's the difference between comma crazy, which is the War Boys throwing themselves, they're just jumping for a chance to die, and self-sacrifice? For instance, Splendid hangs herself out of the door and puts her body in the way of Furiosa.
This is the pregnant wife of Immortan Joe.
She's like, if you're going to shoot Furiosa, you're going to have to shoot me.
That's right.
There's a lot of those kinds of moments. So help me understand, what's the difference between these two versions of throwing yourself into death's way?
Oh, man, that is such a good question, isn't it? Because one of the humanizing elements of Fury Road is that we realize the War Boys, there's some humanity even to those dudes.
Yeah.
Right? Even these crazy dudes who spray their face with face paint, and they're terrifying. They're on poles, swinging around. They're playing guitar on the top of, like the War Boys. Like they're like the orcs of Mad Max Fury Road, except we get to see one actually like come around, and he's a human being. Like he's got redemptive elements, right? That one guy's name is Nux.
Totally, and he's lovable.
Yeah. And Nux initially starts off as a war boy who wants to ride eternal, shiny and chrome. And Immortan Joe himself sprays his mouth with the spray paint and is like, if you pull this off, I myself will see you to Valhalla. And the scene where Nux is like, he's like crying, like he's sad and like he's a true believer.
Oh.
The thing with the war boys is they're true believers.
Yep.
Right? And the tragedy of that we're meant to feel through the eyes of Nux, because again, if we just left them at like we're 100 feet away from the War Boys watching them blow up, we go, ugh, but we don't say, wow, that's tragic. Again, just to point this out,
Yeah.
Furiosa left us 100 feet away from the war boys, and we don't give a rip about how many of them die. We truly don't care.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fury Road brought us in through the eyes of Nux, a war boy who's believed with everything he has that he could go to Valhalla if he does it right by Immortan Joe, his cult leader / deity. And when he fails at that, because he like, remember, he jumps on the war rig and then his chain like gets snapped in like 10 seconds after Immortan Joe sprays his face with spray paint, he just has failed. Like he's just like absolutely blown it.
Yeah. Immortan Joe says, mediocre.
Which, to be a war boy and hear that, you're giving it everything you got. And so it humanizes Nux, and Nux actually just wanted to highlight his character arc because then one of the wives actually comforts him. But he's like hitting his head on the thing, and she's like, stop that. Stop hurting yourself. That right there is a key to what makes a noble sacrifice. Nux thinks he's a thing, not a person.
Yeah.
He thinks he's a tool of Immortan Joe, and this one act from this escaping girl actually redeems him a little bit and shows him like, no, you have value. So maybe one critical component would be you know what you're giving up, and you understand that you're doing it for the sake of someone else. Versus this bizarre worldview that teaches you this is what you're born to do, like hype, like craziness of spraying your face with spray paint is like, this is one of the reasons why the movie works. Like that world building is so like that this is how they'd hype themselves up for this.
Yeah, I think also it matters whether or not what you're giving up for is real. Like they expose to him the lie of his worldview. They throw him off the rig. Well, first they're like, we're not going to kill him. We said no unnecessary deaths. So they're trying to throw him off the thing, and he's fighting them. And as they throw him out, they say,
wow,
you're just an old man's war fodder.
Wow.
Who killed the world? And they're shattering his worldview by saying, you think, you've pledged your life to this guy. But if that's true, then what does that make us? Because going back to that scene where she stops him from hitting his head, he's like, I failed or whatever. And she's like, in my eyes, what does she say? I forget what she says, but basically to the effect of, we're escaping now. And that to me is a success. So what you deemed a failure actually helped us to escape.
You're totally right. Who says no unnecessary deaths? I forgot about that line.
The girls. The girls are always kind of talking over each other. So I love the way it's a very cool stylistic choice, the way the dialogue kind of filters in and is overlapping, and you don't necessarily know who's talking or who they're saying what to, but it's like it adds to the soundtrack.
Adds to the crazy feeling of it.
And they say that. And furthermore, when they meet the old women on the bikes, she kind of goes, I kind of thought you guys would be above the whole killing thing. What do you think about that?
What does the woman on the bike say in response to that?
She's explaining how she's killed everyone she's ever fought out here. And then she goes, I thought you guys would be above this. And she's like, maybe she just says, look, you kind of can't be. But she then brings out her bag of seeds and says, I'm going to plant these seeds. Everywhere I go, I plant one. And the soil is always sour. But, like the idea is maybe someday these seeds could blossom back into the oasis that they left.
Splendid is the one who saves Nux's life by saying no unnecessary killing.
Yes.
They have a knife up to his head.
Yes.
And they don't. And Furiosa wants him dead.
Yeah.
But, right?
Yep.
But they just throw him out instead. That act of mercy, just to go back, that actually reclaims not just some of their humanity, but it leads to Nux's redemption.
Yeah. Yes.
No unnecessary killing. How about that? And by the way, Furiosa just ignores that. That film didn't even register that would be an ethic anyone could or would or should have.
Well, okay, well. Hold on, though. What about her mother shows up to rescue her at the very beginning, and there's a woman in the tent that's been taking care of little Furiosa.
Oh.
And she's like, don't kill me. I'm a mother, too. And her mother decides, okay, I'll let you live. And then she promptly runs outside and starts screaming. So it's kind of like she did show mercy because that's what we do. And it ended up biting them in the butt.
Okay, no, fair play. Totally forgot about that scene. But that's right. They do show a moment of mercy. But what happens to that at the end? We ignore it. Long gone. Rearview mirror.
I'm sticking to my guns, and I'm going to say that this movie could be recut in order to tell a story where Furiosa has humanity and then loses it, and then finds that humanity again in in the Mad Max movie, but I don't know who could prove me right.
I'm gonna hearing you say that again, I'm gonna tweak my lid closed stance and say maybe the filmmakers were actually going for a descent and trying to set up a rebirth. But if that's what they were doing, then the wire they crossed was the old too much
Peachtree.
Too much Peachtree. Altogether too much. We're meant to really revel in that. They're trying to show a descent, but they're not really trying to frame it as a descent. They're trying to be like, girl boss.
So okay, back to the movie at hand.
So okay, sorry.
So one of the things sounds like one of the things that is inherent to humanity is no unnecessary deaths. But one of the themes I find very interesting is that the wives go through a bit of a character arc as well. At first, they're these like innocent, they're just like pure white, they're like totally clean, they've lived in this sheltered sanctuary their whole life. Their life is a living hell, and they know that, but they start out with this righteous mission to free themselves and free each other because they know deep in their hearts that we are not things, and you cannot own people. That is true. So now they're out there in the world, but they're a little bit like vulnerable, and then they keep getting put in these situations where they're like, we don't know what to do. Furiosa hands them the gun, and she's like, reload this gun, and the girl's like, I don't know. And then Zoe Kravitz grabs the gun and is like, let me do it. And she starts loading the gun. That's like, they're rising to the occasion. They're thrown into this scary world, but they're like, they're showing up. They're like, what can we do to help? Even the like hang out the door and use my body as a human shield. They're not totally helpless, even though they're weak and feeble.
I noticed that too. And one of the amazing aesthetic juxtapositions is the harshness and rusty metal and explosions and shrapnel of the world combined with these absolutely fragile women who have just been kept in this like sanctuary, the only sanctuary in the whole world, But you're so right. Yeah, their character arc is recovering a little bit of agency for themselves and realizing they're not just victims. They actually have a say in how this goes. And that's the feminism that Fury Road presents that's just a little closer to the mark, right, than just pure like girl bossism. It actually takes their frailty and weakness into account, but it doesn't let them off the hook for the actions that they then take. And so we actually love to see them take responsibility.
Yes. Because may I say, even if they're physically vulnerable, they are not emotionally vulnerable.
Right.
Like they are tough in spirit. And that to me is a true girl. A real girl boss doesn't have to beat up all the dudes. She can use her strength of character.
Yeah, that's right.
To make a difference.
Because if we say that she has to beat up all the dudes to be an effective girl boss, we're essentially telling the lie again that might makes right. We're trying to beat the world on its own terms. But that's just not how life is. Might doesn't make right. The strongest person isn't always the best. So why would we try to tell a story of empowered femininity by having the girl beat up the dudes every time, as if that's the box we need to check to make sure we have a strong female character?
Silly.
I wouldn't say that about a strong male character. A strong male character isn't the one who always beats up all the dudes every time. No, because we recognize that men, there's morality at the heart of that choice. So where's our double standard with women? Actually, you were talking about Jane Austen. She's kicking back against a Victorian world that put women up on a pedestal and said they can do no wrong. Right? But she's like, you guys are just as ignorant of like women as anyone. Like here's like a more accurate portrayal, right? And it's because it's humanity. Men and women are the same. We're both moral agents.
Yes.
With different circumstances at times. Different injustice. And especially in this world. Yeah, no, that's such a good character arc. Can I throw one more at you?
Yeah, throw it.
It totally links in with exactly what you're saying, but they're running and running and running and running. So for the first half of the movie is running to the green place.
Yes, yeah.
Right? And then there's all this development with Max and Nux and these girls, and they finally meet the mothers. And then they're like, okay, let's go to the green place. And then they realize, Max, remember, he rides his motorcycle that they gave him way out ahead of them and then turns around and stops him and says, you're going to ride for 160 days to nothing in that direction. But I have this idea. What if we go back to the Citadel and we try to make a home there?
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit like Simba. Like, there's no Hakuna Matata here. You can't just ignore your problems. just to really combine two completely different movies.
Not that different. They're both running through the desert.
Mad Lion.
They both deal with predation in the circle of life.
They both eat some bugs, I think. I'm sure at some point.
But Dad, don't we eat the antelope?
So then they drive the war rig right back through the Death Canyon. And so the director, I heard.
Yeah, Miller.
George Miller's idea was, what if we just filmed a movie that's one straight ahead chase sequence? And so essentially, that's the second half of the movie. They just ride it back through the pass and nearly everybody dies.
Yeah.
But how they resolve the story is Furiosa in the rig are like raised up, right? And then they take control of the citadel and they release the water for everybody. They actually make a green paradise where they've been keeping it for themselves. They actually release it to the people. And the best part is Mad Max himself looks up and she realizes he's not on the platform with us. And he did it selflessly and he just disappears into the crowd.
Oh, he got his redemption.
Come on. How's that for redemption?
He gets his redemption because he goes back. When the voices in his head, seemingly, he abandoned them. I think that's what we're meant to assume, is that whatever girls he was trying to save the first time, he didn't go back and now they haunt him.
In his tragic backstory.
So he turns around to go back. That's his redemption.
Yeah.
Furiosa, her redemption is she's looking for, well, remember when she's about to die and she goes, home. How I take that is what she's looking for is redemption, but what she's really looking for is home. And then the moment when she realizes that the green place doesn't exist anymore, she wails. And that breaks her. But somehow she can go back and create home. The thing that she has been searching for could exist if she goes back.
Yeah.
And then the girls, they're looking for, I think she says, they're looking for hope. And they totally find that amongst the biker girls, the biker women.
Yes.
Like when the young girls get off the rig and the old women are like, they're all like looking at each other like, you're crazy. What? I've never seen anyone like you before. And they're just marveling at each other. But for the first time, these girls have a vision for what they could be other than like breeding stock.
Harem chicks.
They could be persons.
That's right.
They could have lives and could make their own decisions and have an impact on the world around them. So they get their hope as well.
Yes. And even if they die, it's better to live that way. And the grannies instinctively get that. And there's all these wrinkly, awesome grannies who are like shooting these crazy guys with guns. Like it's really cool.
Well, and just to keep pushing this, the grannies are wandering around going, they're just scrapping out their survival, but they're not building anything.
That's right.
Which is what they used to do. They used to farm and they used to have a place. And now they're just scrapping around trying to survive.
And tricking people with, like, remember they roll up and there's that one girl. They're like, help me. And Max is like, that's bait, and they're kind of stooped to some of those gross tactics. We kind of gloss over that, but,
right.
There's some redemption there too if you want to really read into it.
But for everyone to go back to the Citadel and like set the people free in a sense to like open up the water, it's like the culmination of every single person's character arc.
Yes, that's what makes this like almost a flawless movie.
Yeah. And Knox, he wants to die crazy, right? At the beginning, he just wants to live in Valhalla or whatever. At the end, he has the opportunity to sacrifice himself so that the girls can get away. But he's doing it now for a real cause, and he knows what he's doing it for.
It's the journey from insanity back to sanity.
Yes.
Goodness and sanity are linked in real life and certainly in the world of Mad Max. Ooh. All the bad guys are absolutely bonkers. All the good guys are struggling against the radioactive, sour world they live in and trying to retain some measure of sanity, right? Because everyone, and the whole point is it's Mad Max. Are you kidding? Like, that's the premise. That's the world building, is everyone's insane.
Yeah.
And the normal people, even the guy who drives the war rig in Furiosa and befriends Furiosa, we're meant to just be like, oh yeah, he's like a normal guy. Like he's a normal human guy. And that's meant to be refreshing. And it is, because sanity is good. But you regain your sanity by regaining your humanity.
Ooh.
And like sanity and the moral choices to show mercy and to trust another person and to not always be on your guard and schizophrenic, but to like be like, okay, even if it kills me, I'm going to do what's right for you.
Yes.
That regains people's clarity on what the world should be. And so the antidote, and you know what? I was going to say the first part of Furiosa where there's that history man.
Yeah.
If we were going to say what we liked about Furiosa,
yeah.
I liked the history man at first.
Uh-huh.
They had a character there that they really could have done something with. Now, it turns out he's a hypocrite, fraud. There's exactly 3 good guys in all of Furiosa. The mom who dies.
Yeah.
The rig driver who's immaculate.
Yeah.
He's the
Mr.
Prince Charming
Perfect.
who somehow drove a war rig for Immortus Joe, but never really didn't bother him
Never
until
killed it.
I don't
Never
know, but
killed
we don't-
anyone,
He didn't need to
probably.
change. He was always perfect.
Shiny white conscience.
And then Furiosa, who is bloodthirsty and brutal. But they had a fascinating start to a character, and they threw it away with the history man. He shows her a little bit of compassion. He's like, "Yeah, I could teach you to read if you like.
Yeah.
Then you could be a history man, you know." But in the end, they just show that he's a slimy hypocrite.
Yeah, just make yourself valuable.
They should have had him, even if they had kept that moral prick in his conscience going a little longer and showed him making a decision to abandon. But what they show him is a hypocritical fool who all along was just doing this to like survive, and that's all he cares
Yeah.
about. But that's not true to how they set him up. They actually show a moment of humanity. And what they needed to do was deal with his moral decision making seriously instead of play it off for crazy ambience that's all a part of this mad, crazy world.
Such a good way to describe it.
Could have been like a Nux character, like a guy who actually starts bad but then has a moment of redemption. They just don't do it. And I
know.
kills me. They could have
I
told a better
know.
story. That's what really galled me. And I'll just say this, Carlin, too, like there's a lot of disturbing things in Furiosa. I would say like this one along with Oppenheimer would be the 2 so far we've covered that I don't recommend you go watch. And part of the reason that all the disturbing things in this movie hit different than Fury Road, first of all, is that they're like twice as bad. Like the cannibal
Oh, yeah.
caves and the like limbs and just they just show more. They just do. And they show like a fetus being, like being born and mutated. I just was like, I have a new baby. I'm out at that point. I don't need to be watching this. But the reason why you especially don't is that there's nothing redemptive about any of it. It's all part of the background ambiance of what a crazy
Yeah.
world. Look, in this, it's so messed up.
Right. As if that's why we liked Mad Max.
It is why some people like Mad Max. But it's not why Mad Max is one of the best action movies of all time.
Yeah.
Movies that just go for the gut punch, those are a dime a dozen. You could rent 10 of those from the movie theater and watch them back to back to back to back.
Can you make that noise one more time? That's great. We need more of that.
I need a better word to describe the feeling.
said
I don't have
viscera.
a good vocabulary.
I liked Viscera. I thought that was good.
Or I could just keep going.
It's gore, gratuitous gore.
Gratuitous.
Yeah, why use words when sound effects do exactly what you need them to do?
Whereas a really good story can hint at all of the same things and just still tell a redemptive story. Like cannibalism is real in the world. You can tell a story where there's cannibalism, but when you just show it that hard and you're just trying to just evoke people's gag reflex, but with nothing to show for it, like what's the point of this? Like, it just is, it's there to evoke something neurological versus tell any kind of story.
As you've said many times on this podcast, we're meaning-making creatures. And the things that
Yes.
last are the things that tell meaningful stories.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you can include, a story is just the arrangement of facts towards a meaning. It's just looking at the facts, arranging them in a certain way so that we understand the meaning behind them. And that means you can include some facts that are disturbing or difficult. But if they're
Yes.
driving towards a point of something greater, like something we've also said, the
Yeah.
Bible is full of disturbing R-rated details.
Totally.
But it's the greatest story of all time because it's pointing to the truth of reality.
The big thing is, why are you showing us this? Why are you telling us this? Any documentary
Yeah.
about the Holocaust will include potentially very graphic footage, but why are you telling us this? And that informs how you tell it, because you don't just flash scenes of viscera in a Holocaust documentary. Why? Because the point of it, if it's any good, is to remind us of the humanity of the victims and of what
Yes.
human beings are capable of if we forget the humanity of the victims. But you can't remind us of the humanity of people while using them as visceral objects to evoke an audience reaction. It's exactly why in Oppenheimer, his mistress, played by Florence Pugh, when we see full frontal nudity, we stop seeing her as most people, I would argue. Now, you still could, but the normal human sexual response to that kind of nudity precludes you seeing her as a relatable character. Now you're excited, right?
Yeah.
Most men would be, I could just say. And you stop viewing her as a person, you see her as an object. Same way, like when we see the victims of the cannibal feast, again, we know that there's cannibalism. I'm not saying that you can't tell a good story or an appropriate story that includes like elements of that. But when we just see it, it's just like, why are you showing us this?
Yeah.
It's not to humanize anything. It's to dehumanize further.
And it becomes less disturbing. The thing that is disturbing about it should be that we take humans seriously. We take human sexuality seriously. We take the dignity of a human body seriously. And it's the violation of that is so disturbing. So when you use it just to play, like, oh, well, we get a response, you are violating something real, but you have lost the reason why it was disturbing in the first place, because you just like shocking yourself it's like sticking your finger in a light socket, like what? For entertainment.
No, that's right. And I know like it's no fun to do a movies podcast and then just like rip on the morality of the movie, but like this is an important part of why we do this. Like discernment actually matters in film because it's easy to feel like, hey, I didn't like that, or like that movie shouldn't have that, but not articulate why. And I think you just articulated why so well.
Yeah.
I think that's exactly it.
I want to say also, entertainment should not be mindless. But there is also a spectrum on which it's okay for entertainment to be more weighty or less weighty. I heard a really good example for this in a podcast where they were talking about how do you decide like when your kids are allowed to just listen to silly pop music that's not meaty at all versus when you want them to listen to like good art.
Totally.
And she equated it to kind of food. Like sometimes we go to the county fair and we eat cotton candy. There's absolutely no nutritional value in cotton candy, but you know what? That's okay because we're participating in old school Americana and we're creating memories and whatever. But for every meal, it'll kill you. Instead, you could have a steak that's been marinated and sautéed, and you could have vegetables that have been, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like a lot more goes
Who
into
cares?
that kind of a meal, and that
tastes
should
good, too.
probably be like our main bread and butter should be more quality
That's right.
entertainment. Every once in a while, it's probably okay to eat cotton candy in the form of a movie.
That's completely right. And the other thing I would say is that in food, some things are meant to be food and some things are not meant to be food. You can eat Tide Pods because of the rush that gives you. But that's the same thing with entertainment.
Right. They're pretty.
You can tell a story about anything. You can show anything with a camera. But some things like funnel cake is in the same category as steak on one level, even if they're different ends of the spectrum. And none of them are morally wrong in and of themselves. But eating Tide Pods is the equivalent of showing gratuitous violence or pornographic material. It hurts you. It actually does hurt you. Even if you think it doesn't. Even if you're like, let me just pop one Tide Pod. It's like, well, you might not know. I mean, like it might taste good or why ever people ended up eating Tide Pods, but it's not meant to be ingested like that. It's just not.
Hot take. Tide Pods are to food what AI is to storytelling.
That's a whole bigger discussion.
AI is like, it looks like a movie, kinda, but there's absolutely no meaning making in it. It's like pretty and blue.
Tide Pods literally burn your esophagus, so maybe there's too strong of a... but they taste amazing, so...
So... Hey, your baby's going to wake up soon.
What's a Christian worldview of some of these themes? How do we retain our humanity in a crazy world?
I mean, it's almost like it's so fundamental, it's hard to put into words. But the Bible tells us that humans are made in the image of God. And that, I think, is true on many levels in many ways. But what it means right now is that we are stamped with the image and inherent dignity and value given to us by a creator. And the best version of humans reflects something of God's character.
Yeah, people are not things. It's that simple. God created a galaxy full of things. He created a specific creation that's meant to mirror him with real agency. You can manipulate things. That's fine. Build whatever kind of car you want. You know, smash together whatever parts to make whatever kind of car. But when you start doing that with image bearers, you're violating something sacred. And I think the best part of a story like Mad Max is it kind of shows us what the world could be if you lose that reality, and makes us hungry for just a little bit of restoration. Even if the people are still weird, even if they're wrinkly, or they're unlikely action heroes like grandmas shooting people with muskets, you know, like you just wouldn't think of that. But there's something so redemptive that in a parched world, it tastes like a little bit of water, you know? And I would say we're longing for that so much in real life that I would just say, don't let that longing pass you by. If you're caught in a revenge cycle, let's talk about this theme. Revenge is like drinking more poison, but what your body needs, what it's crying out for is water, but you don't give it. You drink something fake, and you just keep sitting in that gooey cycle of revenge. It could never be satiated. Ironically, the truest moral statement that came out of all of Furiosa, sorry, I'm talking about it again, was from Dementis when he's like, this won't bring anybody back. Ironically, he's dead right. That's why Furiosa goes down like a weird, toxic chemical brew. And Mad Max has enough water in it where you're like, actually, there's something good. There's something good here, right?
So he is right. You can't bring them back.
Yeah.
So it sounds like the water that you're looking for is to bring them back. But you can't do that. So what can you have instead?
That's where I think Jesus gets at the heart of it when he says, if you want to be my disciple, you have to take up your cross and follow me. Right? In a perfect world, there'd be no cross to take up. But Jesus is saying, embrace the suffering that this life entails, accept it, and follow Jesus. And there's greater joy in doing that this side of eternity and forever, right? Because we know at the end of time, God's going to restore all things. It'll all be made a green paradise. But for now, how do we live? And that's where Jesus is teaching, for those who have taken it seriously, is so revolutionary, because you have to swallow the losses that you've sustained and realize, like, I'm not bringing my family back this side of eternity. I'm going to take that hurt and release it to God. There's nothing actually that could bring them back. So I need to actually just choose to forgive and choose to let the cycle of evil end with me. I can pursue justice, but I shouldn't pursue revenge. Like the classic Gandhi quote, eye for an eye makes the whole world blind. Well, Gandhi's drawing directly from Judeo-Christian ethics. Nothing in his Hindu background actually would have given him that. But Jesus is teaching, transform the world, right? And actually his like golden rule, Jesus didn't invent the golden rule, but it's, you know, his statement for our purposes is the like starting point on that. And Jesus does something unique with the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And he actually says, preemptively forgive your enemies because God has preemptively forgiven you. He takes it a step further. And that's how a philosophy of nonviolence like Gandhi or MLK, you know, I'm not saying nonviolence is appropriate in every instance. I believe in real justice, but it only makes sense, even a quest for justice, not revenge, only makes sense if we've been forgiven much, if there's a reason to swallow our hurt and love other people and let the evil stop with us.
Yeah, I think what you said just a second before is essential. Forgive others is only possible because Christ has forgiven you. God has forgiven you on behalf of Christ. We're all stuck in the sticky mud of injustice. We've all become enemies of God. We're all living in this Mad Maxy kind of world where like even our decent works, even the things that we do that are good and positive have mixed motivations. We're tainted.
Yeah.
None of us can escape.
Yeah.
None of us can escape the evil.
Yeah.
Even Gandhi, even the best people on earth that we look to and revere as like saints, they were damned and going to hell apart from one perfect sacrifice that God allowed to be substituted for us. So now we can say, okay, I forgive you because I have been forgiven.
Right.
Because we can all be forgiven. It's free access for all of us.
Well, you see that on a lesser scale, like even in this film, right? Like when someone like one of Immortan Joe's wives or just this girl chooses to dignify a war boy, right? And even forgive him because he was trying to kill them and show some empathy and understanding. Yeah. That turns him around and makes him go, oh my gosh, I have so much more to live for. It humanizes him, and then he in turn humanizes everyone else. Like Mad Max Fury Road, so many redemptive elements to that actually point at the heart of reality. And Furiosa left me feeling like I feel when I don't forgive someone. When I just ride that revenge train, and even in my petty little suburban way, when I ride that revenge train all the way, like I'll ride that revenge train for 48 hours or whatever, just harbor whatever petty grievance, cut me off in the traffic. My colleague spoke mean to me, just harbor that. That's the same feeling I got at the end of Furiosa.
Planting a peach tree in their pelvis.
On that note, Carl, fewer peaches. I think this movie could have benefited from fewer peaches all around.
Fewer peaches all around. Well,
no
said.
Peaches.
Peaches
fewer
and milk.
Fewer peaches.
Gross. We don't need to talk about it.
Hey, Cinema Snorkel.
Well, Case, it's good to be back in the saddle.
Good to be back in the driver's seat, revving our V8 engines. Okay, if you could weld one random object onto the front of your Mad Max car,
custom.
What are you welding onto your car? A mannequin?
Your custom ride? I would want a gold inlaid snail shell right on the front.
That's beautiful.
With spikes coming off of it and stuff. Yeah, I like the tank treads also on the one car. That I think that would be a good way to get around. Yeah, what would you have?
I would loop together 3 Toyota Siennas. Just like what Dementis did with his Chariot. I would weld together 3 Toyota Siennas into a mega Toyota Sienna.
Yeah.
That can hold 56 people in the back and tons of cargo in a stroller. Oh, I'd ride behind the Siennas in a stroller, like a tricked out, like chromed up stroller with enormous rims.
You guys have an awesome stroller. It would be a great Mad Max stroller.
That stroller, you put a V8 on that thing, it's an instrument of death for others, not yourself. It would protect you. Can you picture me just riding over a bad guy just in a tricked out?
I can picture you riding around Covenant College.
You know what? I think I'm going to do it.
You do that. Well, we'll catch you guys later.
Hey, hasta la vista.
Okay, bye.